Good morning on the West Coast, good afternoon on the East Coast. My name is Mike Hamilton, and we are here to talk about strategies for threat prevention and compliance. So this is one of the Lumifi webinar series, and I want to start out by saying we're not here to sell you stuff, we're here to tell you stuff. Today, it's going to be myself, Brad Swanson, and Fred Langston. Brad, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Brad Swanson. I'm a principal consultant here at Lumify, where I focus primarily on things like vCISO, FSAs, SRAs, helping you with your assessments, helping with policy work, documentation, pretty much everything under the sun. I also do a little bit of incident response. Been doing security for about 30 years, everything from small mom and pop shops up to large companies like Thermo Fisher Scientific, Amazon. I'm just really happy to share some information with everybody today and to hear about you and what some of your struggles might be.
All right, thanks, Brad. Brad's going to be in the chat. He's going to try and field any questions that come in, and he's going to talk about a few things while we're going through this. Fred, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Fred Langston, Executive Vice President of Professional Services here at Lumify. Again, also 30 years of information security experience. And everything we're going to talk about today is near and dear to my heart.
Yep. My name's Mike Hamilton. I am also one of the veterans here, a little more than 30 years experience, and I've held a lot of roles in government, CISO of the city of Seattle, policy advisor for Washington State, vice chair of a Homeland Security Government Coordinating Council for Infrastructure Protection, and blah, 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 a whole bunch of stuff. Here's what we're going to talk about. So this is a little bit of a teaching session. And we're going to talk about risk management and the way to approach that. Threat prevention, obviously, is on everybody's mind right now. Fred's going to talk about security solutions that we have that fit into risk management and threat prevention. We are going to give away a white paper, which is a guide for risk governance. Governance is a big part of keeping yourself out of civil litigation. We'll talk more about that. And then Fred will talk a little bit about how to ensure a successful professional services engagement in the event that you are going to hire consultants to do things. Some of those things you need to do. It's never good to do your own penetration test. It's never good to do your own risk assessment. They tend to be aspirational when that happens. And we want to help you prevent that. So moving on, how do we think about risk? So risk is the product means multiply, of these two terms. The likelihood that a bad thing happens, or the probability, that's what the P is, okay? So T is some threat. V is a vulnerability. Some threat goes after a vulnerability, and there's a likelihood that that happens. And then there's an impact to that. And when we're talking about impact, we don't want to talk about cyber, something cyber, right? No scary Russian buffer overflows, SQL injection, cross-site request forget that. Especially when we're talking at a business level, we need to talk about the business outcomes that we're trying to avoid. And there's 5 of them right there. And you can use these 5 in your risk assessment. So, number 1, unauthorized disclosure of protected records. We know that that has a pretty well-defined cost. It's a couple $100 per record. You have 1 million records in a database, and those records meet the definition of personally identifiable information. You have about $200 million in potential liability. Can I have $50,000 to implement controls that will cut that risk in half? Oh, well, you get $100 million of risk reduction for an outlay of $50,000. That makes sense. That's the way to have the conversation, right? Cyber is not the way. Second one is theft, largely through business email compromise, account redirection, sending you an invoice and you just might pay it, right? There's a threshold under which accounts payable won't question something. There's a lot of that going on. Extortion, the buzz term that everybody has latched onto is ransomware, but it's extortion. Maybe a denial of service attack hits your perimeter and you can't function, and you get the message, pay us and we'll make this stop. Okay, lots of extortion going on. The geopolitical situation we find ourselves in now has us seeing this intentional disruption more and more, especially the countries that are actively involved in war right now. They're knocking each other's infrastructure down. And we have had lots of reports from the FBI and Homeland Security, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, telling us that nation states have a presence in our critical infrastructure. And at the time of their choosing, they're going to pull that trigger. And so let's say China invades Taiwan, we show up to be on the side of the Taiwanese, and all of a sudden our lights go out. Okay, so that kind of disruption is looking more and more possible and even likely. And then the last one is you don't want your business to be used to attack other businesses, right? The third party attack, the supply chain attack, right? This is a major, major way that a lot of records are stolen all at once. The last one, remember Change Healthcare? Well, there's another revenue management company that just got hit, and there will be hundreds of hospitals having to notify their patients that records have been disclosed. You don't want to be that agency, that business that's responsible for records disclosure, theft, extortion in all of your business partners. All right. So here's 5 business outcomes that we're trying to avoid. Okay. So how do you do this? All right. Well, if you're doing it right, and you can look at all kinds of standards of practice, you can look at regulatory requirements, and they all essentially say the same thing. You need to do a penetration test annually and hire somebody to break into your network. You need to do an annual risk assessment against some recognized framework. And if you're in a regulated sector, they're probably giving you that. If you're in energy generation, it's the NERC CIPS, Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards. If you take credit cards, it's the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. If you're everybody else, you can use the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is really highly recommended. It's an outcome-based framework. Everybody needs to do security awareness training, and you need to get attestation from your users. You need to go through your incident response plan and exercise that with a tabletop. So all these things have to be happening. There's things that have to be done on a daily basis, right? The things that are going to pop up, incident management, you can't plan for that. You may have consultants around and you need to manage them. So here is really in the simplest way it can be shown, here's what you need to be doing if you are doing it right. Okay, so this is risk assessment, and risk assessment will show that you are missing some controls. And if a control is missing, well, because of that missing control, what's the likelihood that we could have records disclosure, theft, extortion, disruption, or be used as a third party? Okay, well, let's say uh, remote access is managed. That comes from the NIST framework. All right. Well, let's see. We don't really manage our remote access that well. All right. What's the likelihood that something bad could happen? Well, it's probably a medium. What would the impact of that be? Well, it would be high. Well, what's medium times high? Well, it's medium high. You have a medium high risk right there because you don't manage your remote access very well. That's how risk assessment works. And then you need a corrective action. And these corrective actions need to be something that you're actively managing, going along, making sure that you're getting budget for those, doing procurements, et cetera, et cetera. And if you do all of these things, and then there's some kind of event and you lose a bunch of records and you have to fall on your sword, you have to make a public statement that, hey, we lost records. And then here comes the attorneys with a class action suit. Okay, this civil litigation happens right away. There are lawyers hanging on this, waiting for this to happen, waiting to set up a class of plaintiffs. Well, if you've been doing all of this, okay, and you can say, here's our risk assessment and our corrective action plan, and here are the attestations from our users that they've had security awareness training. There are a lot of states where it's embodied into state law that a safe harbor is created so that you are exempt from that civil litigation because you're doing it right. Because the thing is, it's not that we're not doing what we're not supposed to do. It's not what we're doing what we're supposed to do. It's because we're outgunned. The the bad guys really, really have an advantage over us, okay? So when we say a cyber event is a foreseeable risk, this is showing up more and more in these class action suits, right? And they will always say, well, you didn't take the steps to protect my information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. in these suits, lawyers are saying this was a foreseeable risk. And the reason lawyers use that term is because there's a standard of foreseeability in the legal profession, which says, and I'll paraphrase, if you fail to take steps to address a foreseeable risk, you are guilty of negligence. Okay. And the word negligence is starting to show up in these lawsuits more and more and more. So, I say this kind of tongue in cheek. I've briefed senators, governors, generals, lots of people from Congress. You can't talk about cyber, right? Their eyes are going to roll. But the first time you're talking to an executive, you say negligence, you have an audience. They are paying attention. All right. And now civil and criminal actions are part of this, even though we are outgunned. The federal government just backed off on all kinds of support through an executive order. It's up to states and locals now to make sure that we don't get infrastructure disruption. It's also up to state and locals to manage disasters, which, since we live around a bunch of volcanoes, I can tell you that's probably not going to go well. Again, your documented security controls, that's what keeps you away from the civil litigation, but it's also a competitive differentiator. There are standards like CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which says if you want to bid on a project with the Department of Defense and soon likely all federal agencies, you have to be at least this cyber tall and you have to prove it. You have to be certified to level 2, level 3. Okay. Well, if you are certified and you have controls in place, then you can bid on those federal contracts. The converse is also true. They will not even let you bid if you haven't gone through the process of this certification. So yes, a competitive differentiator. Okay. Um, how are you going to get this done? Well, use your internal resources as much as possible. There are lots of tools out there to conduct a risk assessment. Um, Outsource those that you can't deliver internally, which is why we want to talk a bit about some of the things that we do, because you can't do all this yourself. Can't do your own penetration test, and somebody should really guide you through your first risk assessment and hand it off to you. So let's talk about some of those things. Fred?
Yeah. So I love starting out with this painfully crowded over information diagram because it really lays out what we're dealing with. And a lot of people think, when they think cyber, they think systems and networks. And this whole left half of this diagram is showing the world of things that we need to put in place to have an effective cybersecurity program, right? It starts with policies and procedures and processes. All those need to be documented. If you don't have them documented, then you really don't have a program. You would be, there's a maturity model that's pretty well known, 1 through 5. You would be at 1. In other words, you're just kind of making it up as you go, right? So foundational, right? Equally foundational are our plans and that exercise of your table, using a tabletop exercise. Also critically foundational. As Mike mentioned on the risk equation, if you want to manage that impact component, right? Probably the most important component. In other words, how bad can things get? The best way to do that is respond absolutely as quickly and efficiently as possible to kick the bad guys out, recover as fast as possible, hopefully not pay a ransom, and get back on your feet, right? So critical, foundational. If you don't have these, you kind of don't have an information security program. Everybody knows training is part of that. Mike mentioned how important training is. And another place people forget, security starts in procurement, full stop, right? It's when you go out and you decide, I'm going to buy something. If you do not have security requirements built into that, and you do not have things in your contract that are holding those third parties to being part of your incident response plan, reporting to you if they have a breach in a very timely, usually 24 hours or maybe 48 hours. But all these things that you put in your contracts are absolutely critical. And as Mike said, in a world where supply chain attacks are the method of choice for the bad guys, this is screaming at you, right? If you do not have good contracts, you are in deep trouble right now. I can tell you the healthcare world, which started doing this with what they call business associate agreements, unfortunately has fallen behind the times in that they've been using a standard agreement for 20 years that doesn't really do anything anymore. So I encourage people to really dig deep here. If you've got intellectual property, right? You're maybe a DNA company, like we know one that's going out of business right now, or something of that nature. This stuff is critically important. The bad guys will try to steal it, and putting in programs to keep spies, corporate espionage, keep those things at bay is actually critically important for high tech companies, big Fortune 500 companies. So click the button, Mike, one time, and it will add some things. So we can design, draft, or secure any of these things, right? The other half of this diagram talks about the world of hardware and devices and all the things that we need to look at, assess, and secure. It starts with code, right? We're building stuff out of code, right? If you're developing, let us help or let somebody help you build a secure development lifecycle that's got testing of these applications throughout the process. You've got a world of network devices, right? So you've got servers, you've got switches, you've got routers, you've got all these devices, VPNs, right? Every one of those is an attack surface that needs to be addressed. You got a firewall protecting things. If you don't have a good firewall, documented firewall configuration that actually says, here's what this rule is meant to do, and you justify every single rule in there, many regulatory standards require that, and you can't get certified
Monthly.
without that. Monthly, right? And then there's the cloud, right? We have the entire world now that's moving to the cloud. That's another entire set of environments, and the cloud is not a homogeneous, big, fluffy, white thing. It's, Amazon has, I think, 120 plus components or service offerings they have as part of their cloud. You need to be efficient and good at all of them if you're going to use them. We got databases, even some places we still see mainframes. But the things we forget about, everybody's got this, right? Your smartphone, right? Everybody's got one. Half our business seems to be being done on those. We've got things like smart cities devices, automatic traffic management system, automated metering infrastructure. All these things are a huge attack targets for the bad guys. As Mike said, if China makes a move against Taiwan, we will find out literally how embedded the Chinese are in our infrastructure, because they will turn out the lights and turn off the traffic management system and put us into a level of chaos that I don't think we're necessarily ready with. Third parties, right? We mentioned how important it is to assess them, having a document and procurement, but you need to manage them, right? They're a constantly changing environment, so you need a program to manage that. IoT, right? Everybody knows the world of IoT might be medical IoT. Got to be secured, critical. Matter of fact, the number one place for ransomware now in a hospital environment is your medical devices, right? That just came out, I think, in the Clearwater report that came out yesterday.
Yep.
Operational technology, right? If you run a factory, you run a municipal government that's got dams and it's got, lights and all that kind of stuff. All that is a whole separate world. We have IT, got OT, right? That is computers that talk to computers, computers that run machines, right? Not ones we're normally interacting with the way I'm doing right now, right? And then there's a physical security. I always tell people the number one way to become a hacker with zero training is to learn how to walk in, throw a laptop under your arm, and walk out the front door, because you've now stolen all the data on that laptop. Click the button one more time, Mike. So we can certainly, there we go. We can hack, we can test, we can assess any of these devices, right? And you should too, right? So what this slide is meant to show you is how broad information security and cybersecurity is in all the areas. If you're missing any one of these components and you have these technologies or these processes or policies in place, you're at risk, right? And that's really what we're trying to get across is think holistically. You can look at a standard, but understand what your environment is. Understand what all the things are on there, the attacks that can be launched against them, and how to protect them. Next slide, please. All right. So what are these things, right? And I'm listing these are things we do, but these are things you need to do. I mean, everybody needs to do these things, right? You got to do a gap analysis. You got to know where you're at. I can't get any better if I don't know where my holes are, right? Foundational efforts. A lot of this is driven by compliance because compliance knows if you don't have this assessment and you don't have this understanding, then you really cannot secure your environment. So we can look at any of the major, regulatory regimes, whatever ones you're under, you're going to need to comply with. And a lot of people now have multiple. If I'm at a hospital, I've got HIPAA, I've got PCI, right? I maybe have state and local privacy laws, and I may have other things I need to do. If I'm a publicly held hospital, I've got SEC reporting requirements if there's a breach. So there's this entire world that you need to understand around what is the government and the regulations trying to drive me towards, and can I prove that if an auditor shows up on my doorstep? Gets a little bit deeper when we get into risk assessment, right? That's gap analysis plus the component Mike said, where you look at here's a hole, here's a vulnerability, here's a weakness. If a bad guy takes advantage of that weakness, what can happen? Right. And that's risk assessment. It's saying if they do this, if they're successful, that means that I have, these particular outcomes and I can quantify or at least qualitatively rate those particular outcomes. That is gold to a board of directors or somebody that cares about the business. Again, it's not cyber anything. It's we could lose $100,000 annually if we do not put these controls in place, called annualized loss expectancy, straight out of the insurance and the finance industry. We're finally getting there where we can even quantify things, which wasn't possible until the last couple of years because we finally have actuarial tables like insurance, right? We know what it costs for a 500-person rural hospital that loses particular information. We know now exactly what that is because we have the data. And then you get over into the whole technical testing world. You need to test everything, and all starts with vulnerability assessment. People, if you don't have a robust vulnerability assessment, vulnerability management program, you're gonna get popped. I will go out. I'll go to Las Vegas and I'll put down money that you within a year will be popped if you're not doing this, because that's the way the bad guys get in. It's either through people or unpatched vulnerabilities, usually on the edge. Okay, those are the statistics tell us that. So how do you test once you've patched things? How do you test to make sure you've caught everything? And remember, they chain things together, and something that may seem innocuous on its own, chained together with 5 other seemingly innocuous things, all of a sudden becomes, I've got domain admin credentials. That's what a penetration test of any of these things, your networks, your wireless, your applications, your mobile apps, your APIs, your cloud, operational technology, all of these need to have somebody act like a hacker and see what they can do. And it gets even better when you get to an advanced stage where you can actually use the people as part of the test, right? Red, blue. We're the bad guys. Your team's the blue team. You're the good guys. Let's see what that actually is like when we're actually doing combat, so to speak, or simulated combat. Or maybe we want to sit next to each other, called purple team, where we're going to go, hey, we're going to launch this attack. Launch it. They go, did you guys see it? They go, didn't see it. Okay, let's fix your monitoring. They make a couple changes. Let's do that again. Fire again, right? Did you see it this time? Yeah, we saw it and we were able to stop it, right? That's testing in real time. That's seeing and working together how to build out your controls while working with the pseudo bad guys and your good guys all at the same time. And we all know social engineering, the entire world of social engineering is, we used to think phishing emails. I think more of us now are worried about voice, SMS, physical. My wife, 3 weeks ago, got one of those, called Good to Go in Washington. It's the toll, automated toll thing. Came running in. Oh my God, my license is being going to be revoked. And I'm screaming, "Don't touch that! Don't hit it! Don't press that button." Wildly successful if you watch in the news. Next slide, please. Okay, and then there's the what. What do we need, right? We need some awareness training program. We think a robust one that is not just, hey, I go in annually and I take my test or take my presentation. It should be weekly. I mean, just like that good to go thing, right? The toll thing, that should be like weekly. This should be a blast. Everybody hears this, right? Let's tell everybody don't fall for this, right? Because even the personal things help raise awareness for business at the same time, right? If I'm thinking of this as a life skill, right? I have to do this everywhere, not just at work. I got to do it at home. Now it's become ingrained in your way of operating as a human being. Policy, we talked about plans, playbooks. That's one thing people forget. Your IR plan, really important. Without playbooks, not complete. Playbooks are, if I have a ransomware attack, I do exactly these things in this order. It will literally say, when I go to the backup system to recover, press these buttons in this order. It should be that granular so you can hand it to anyone that knows how to run a computer and they can go do this, because at 3 a.m., when somebody's on vacation, you may need to hand it to your least experienced person to go and take those actions. Talked about the tabletops, vulnerability management, and third-party risk, all critical. There's another half to this, right? You need governance. Governance is probably one of the most important phrases or fields now in information security, because while all this time we thought of controls and let's put these things in place, if nobody's driving, okay, if nobody's in charge and nobody's got the ability to set what are our tolerances, what will we spend for these things, what will we accept in terms of risk, okay, you're doing it just kind of wildly ad hoc, right? You need organization around this and you need to report this, right? So report it up to the board. So you should have a CISO, a director of security. If you can't afford one, there's a whole world of virtual CISOs, people that can come in once a month, once a week, whatever you desire, to help you do that governance component. And you don't have to go out and hire, frankly, a really, really, really expensive person to do that. Putting all this together into a risk governance a model so you can report to the business, right? People aren't going to give you money, as Mike said, to go, hey, protect me from cyber Russians. No, they're going to give you money when you say, that line of business we rely on for 50% of our annual revenue will be at risk for 3 months if we do not put controls in place to protect it. That gets you over the line, as Mike said. Next slide, please.
I want to just follow up a little bit on risk
Sure.
governance, Fred,
Sure.
because this is starting to show up as a regulatory requirement everywhere. And so in this ecosystem of infrastructure protection, there's the critical sectors, water, dams, finance, energy, et cetera, and everyone has a sector risk management agency. So, for example, in the healthcare sector, the sector risk management agency is Health and Human Services. And so they are allowed through the rulemaking process to change slightly the regulations over time. And what they're all up to right now is all leaning into risk governance. And so I just want to give another definition of what that means. It means that when you have gone through a risk assessment and you've identified some risks and you need to do something with those, right? Give them a treatment. There's only four things you can do. We can accept that risk, we can avoid it, turn off that Windows 2008 machine, we can mitigate that through the application of controls, or we can transfer it through insurance. Accept, avoid, mitigate, transfer. That's it. What you do then, once you've conducted a risk assessment, you take your identified risks to a governance committee, which should have executives there, and say, here's what we recommend we do about this risk. Now, the committee is fine to say, we're going to accept that risk. We don't want to fund that right now. We don't want to resource that right now. But now you have executive fingerprints on that decision. You can't say that's IT's job. Can't do that anymore. And this is especially important if you're a publicly traded organization, because the SEC doesn't mess around. If something happens, they're going to come in and they're going to start looking for your paperwork. And by golly, you had better have some kind of risk governance set up. And if you're publicly traded, this needs to go all the way up to the board of directors. You need to have some kind of advisor in there with the board of directors. That sounds very official, but I can tell you, you're going to be the last thing on the agenda and you're going to be lucky if you get 15 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I did want to say one thing that we really feel is effective when we're doing a virtual CISO engagement is when we're actually hired by the board and not
Yeah.
by the company. Because then we're literally working directly with the people that pull the strings. And frankly, sometimes we're doing kind of oversight to the board about how the company's doing. So interesting how that can work out. And again, when things go wrong, right? You got to prepare, right? Got to understand, what is in place. But when things go wrong, you need to do a bunch of things, and it's 24/7, 3 a.m., bad thing happens, everybody's on deck, right? So you need to have an incident command function. Some places are robust and they can do this. Some places, they just never really feel comfortable because they do it once every 3 years when they have a breach, right? How can you be good at something you do once every 3 years? So having maybe assistance with people that really understand, here's exactly the order of we need to respond and recover from these, can actually minimize damage and pay for itself 10 times over, because a week of downtime that you could have avoided can be tens of millions of dollars, right? For somebody you're going to pay, 100, maybe 100,000 over a terrible incident, right? Having people that can respond, boots on the ground, 24/7, absolutely critically important, doing the investigations and the analysis. And what we recommend, one thing, I will always tell people, I tell every time I meet a new client, I say, one place we never want to meet you is on our IR hotline at 3 a.m. Okay. I don't want to meet you for the first time there ever. Okay. At the very least, have a relationship or contact with us to understand how rapidly to contract this, but much better, get a retainer in place. Okay, having a retainer means no contracting. You pick up the phone, somebody's working. If you don't have a contract and your contracts people aren't there to sign it, we might wait till the next morning before you get there and we can actually start working. Because without a signature, our E&O insurance doesn't kick in. So we have to have a signature. So don't wait, right? You don't want to be, trying to pull this all off at 3 a.m. when nobody's picking up their phone. I need a company to help me recover. I need a company that can help me with the legal part. Let us, do that. Let us put a retainer in place so we can handle that. And, most places, us included, your retainers can be converted into other services at the end of the year.
I think it's important to note too, Fred,
Yeah.
that if you do have that IR retainer and it's a widespread issue, it's not affecting just your organization, but multiple organizations in your area, that IR retainer is going to bump you to the top of the list
Yep.
with Lumify. We'll be able to get
Yeah.
started on yours right away.
Yeah. Great point. So, we always like to point back to the big exchange problem about, was it 2 summers ago?
Hafnium.
Thank you, Hafnium. And we got 60 calls in one day.
Yeah.
Okay, when everybody in the nation got hit in the same day. Well, we have a lot of people in our IR retainer clients all got serviced, and a whole bunch that called. We had to say, sorry, we're full, can't help you. Right. So again, you don't want to be in that position, especially if a major event happens. And then there's, the staff aug component, right? We do have a residency program. If you need an interim SOC analyst, right? We're looking for SOC analysts, the hardest role to fill, I think, on earth right now, from what the papers say. So if you need somebody to carry you through 6 months where you're out looking and trying to train up people, we have a program to help people do that, because we have a huge managed services wing, and these people, experts, that's what they do every day. Next slide, please. All right. Standard offerings. Again, if you go out and you're gonna ever look for help, this is not exclusive to us. This is everybody. We're really trying to tell you, if you're gonna go out, you're gonna look for help, here's kind of how to do it, right? We want to tell you the right way to do it, because there are right ways and wrong ways. So this would be a pretty common set for a very full service information security consulting firm. Should have the full incident response and forensics component, should have a technical testing or offensive security group that does every kind of testing. And then it should have a group we call, and most places follow this model, kind of an enterprise security consulting group, which is regulatory compliance, governance, vCISO, all those sorts of things, right? So if you're going out you should look for companies, I think, that have a relatively well developed portfolio and should have pretty much either all or most of these offerings there. If not, they're probably a very specialized company. They do one thing well. If that one thing is what you're looking for, great. But you probably want people with a much broader set of experience, because these things all cross over. Everything crosses into everything else, right? IR crosses into policy, right? All these things are constantly interweaving themselves. So it really behooves you to have an organization that has that broad set of skills that can look at your entire program in a comprehensive manner. All right, let's go to the next slide. I think Brad's going to tell us what it means to go out and look for what we call a focus security assessment, which is a basic baselining security assessment. Brad, why don't you tell us about that?
Take it away, Brad.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So yeah, a focus security assessment is one of the things we really like to do initially for a client, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And an FSA is a perfect way to look under the rocks and find the things that are hiding that you may not have been aware of. So basically what it is we base it usually on the NIST CSF version 2.0, the latest version of the CSF. If you are an international client, we do have some international customers. They're based in the US, but they have offices all around the world. Other locations in the world will want to use the CIS Top 20 or the Center for Internet Security is what CIS is. Sorry, I'm trying not to use a whole lot of acronyms, but we can kind of tailor a focused security assessment to whatever you're looking to do. As an example, we had a small critical access hospital. They said, hey, we really need a focused security assessment so we can get some grant money. Yes, these can actually pay for themselves and the term of getting grants. They also wanted to do HIPAA though, because they were a healthcare facility. You're able to do a lot of crosswalking between the NIST CSF to other standards like HIPAA, PCI, 800, 171, 853. So it's really a great starting point for you to get a handle on where your business is and where you need to improve. It also is a good way for you to monitor those improvements. You do an FSA each year. You can use a third party such as Lumifi. I would highly recommend that for your first couple until you get the hang of it. But then you can kind of spot check yourself throughout the year against these controls and say, hey, these changes we made are working, or no, they're not really working. We need to switch gears a little bit and improve how we're going to fix that. It's really a great tool for you to use. The deliverables from it are really beneficial to folks, right? So we're going to do a bunch of interviews with you and your teams. We're going to find out what's going on. How do you do these things? Do you have a policy around that, or is it kind of ad hoc? What is your end goal? How do we get there? We're going to take all that information and we're going to write up a report. Now, nobody likes to get a report that says you failed this control and that's it. That's not helpful to you, right? You probably already knew that you were failing that control. So what we do is we make a very big point to say, hey, this control was not quite up to snuff. Here is our recommendation on how you can improve that control. We never want to leave you hanging because at the end of the day, we want to help make the world a better place for everybody. And by just saying you failed to control and walking away does not do that for you. By giving you that advice and that encouragement and those recommendations, that's how you can become better. We're also going to provide you with a roadmap. We do a 2-year roadmap that kind of says, obviously you can't do everything the very next day. So it lays out what we feel are the most critical things that you should be doing, and it breaks everything down over the next 2 years. So you have a plan and a roadmap that you can follow very easily. We also do what we call an executive presentation or a management presentation. And it's basically a presentation that we write that you can present to your board or to senior leadership or whoever. We don't get in the weeds on it. If I'm presenting something to an HR person, they're not going to know all the acronyms I'm going to use. Just like if they're presenting to me, I would not know all the HR acronyms. So we don't use a lot of acronyms or things like that. We put it in plain English. We don't dumb it down. That's disrespectful to your board and to your senior leadership, but we put it in regular English and not tech speak or geek speak, right? And then we're happy to do that 3 ways. We can give you that presentation and you can say, we want to present it. We don't need you. We're good. Or we're also happy to be a mouse in the corner on that call in case somebody from leadership has a question that you might not have the answer to. We're happy to hop in and answer that. Or finally, we're more than happy to present the whole thing to your board or to your leadership as well. Whatever makes the most sense for you and your business. And then finally, something that's kind of odd that you don't really see a lot. A lot of companies won't tell you pricing. They want you to call, get on that phone so they can get you locked in and do those high pressure social engineering sales that are going to push you into buying something just to get a price, right? That's silly. We believe in right size pricing, or as we call it internally, t-shirt size pricing, small, medium, large, extra large. And you can see down here on our pricing example, this is what we would charge for an FSA. We base it on the number of staff that you have because that's kind of a way that we can standardize and kind of figure out the size of your organization. And this is for a straight FSA. Now, if you wanted to add something else, or you want to also add a HIPAA crosswalk, we can easily do that. It affects the price a little bit, but not much. But yeah, this is kind of what you'd be looking at for pricing. We want to make sure that we are very transparent and open here at Lumify. We don't want you to have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get a price from us. So we do the right size pricing. We can customize this though, however you may need. So if there's any questions on this, let us know. We're happy to answer them. I know that we have had some questions and comments as we go through. Kira had asked to describe the impact, the likelihood versus impact to determine your risk formula again. We can cover that in the Q&A. I answered it in the chat, but I don't know if it made it to you, Kira, but we'll talk about that at the end here during our Q&A. And Jens has had a lot of really great questions and comments that we've been addressing as well, and we can cover some of that stuff as well in the Q&A. So with that, I will throw it back to Fred and Hamilton.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to mention on the pricing, we are very unique in this sense because we have done, I think that this group that's at Lumify now, about 1,000 of these at this point. We have an enormous and deep understanding of what it takes to do these and what it takes to do it in these particular size organizations. So unlike our competitors who you go in and you kind of wait till you get a quote sitting in front of you, we can tell you right up front, we've been doing this for 12 years in this group, 30 really overall. So we have a great understanding of what it takes to do these effectively and efficiently. Next slide, please.
Okay. Let me know when I can get into my let's talk about that risk equation. Go ahead,
Okay,
Fred.
yeah, right after this one. Okay.
Okay.
So I just want to help people understand, you're sitting here and you're listening to people that do this. Well, how do you go out and shop for this, right? What's the right way to go out and do this, right? So, you want to go out and you want to identify a number of companies that you probably want to entertain discussions with. Get those people to describe what they do and go through the process. When you get to the point of getting a statement of work or a quote or however they present it to you, there's a couple ways you can receive this, right? Time and materials or fixed fee. We believe heavily in fixed fee engagements because that way you know exactly what you're going to pay and exactly what you're going to get for that. On time and materials engagements, we can put them where we charge you for every hour. We put a not to exceed value on that, but that doesn't mean necessarily that when we get to the end of all those hours, depending on the type of engagement, that you're going to have everything you want. So we tend to lean to fixed fee because we can say, here's exactly what you're going to get at the end of this, but you can have it done either way. And some engagements, like incident response, will always be time and materials. So understand if I'm buying things like incident response or remediation validation, things, or just an SME, subject matter expert advisor bucket of hours. Those are buckets of hours you use as needed. If I want a focus security assessment, a pen test, a policy development, those are fixed fee, and understand that I'm going to pay a particular price and I'm going to get everything I need as described in whatever the statement of work looks like based on that price. Scoping is critically important for you to help the people that you're doing this with understand the breadth and depth of your organization. Uh, Occasionally we come in, I'll use a particular example. A salesperson did some scoping of a company, said they had 5 locations. We got on site and they had 178 locations worldwide. That was a disaster in scoping, right? So understanding exactly when you're going to go talk to somebody, be able to tell them we have this many people, this many locations, this many policies that we're all under. If you've been through a lot of acquisition and merger activity, you may have a company that's got 7 different policies, one at each location for the companies you've acquired. So understanding all these nuances and being very descriptive to the people you're presenting this to will ensure that you get a quote that's realistic and one that actually meets the needs that you have. So you are a key participant in this process, right? So come with a lot of knowledge when you do it. And at the end of it, you want to obtain a quote, right? A quote should have, here's a statement of work. Here's what we're going to do. Here's some level of the timeline. It doesn't have to be a fully spelled out, but I should say this will take 8 weeks to complete or something like that. Should have the pricing in it, should have assumptions. Here's the things we expect of you. Here's the things you expect of us, right? Remember, this is a contract. It's a legal document that you're going to get. And while it may have a lot of cybery stuff in it, it's also got a lot of legal stuff in it as well. So understand that when you're doing this, it's not just a, hey, here's what we're going to do, a pen test. It's, and here's the contractual arrangement, and here's the deliverables, and here's the time frame, and here are the sets of meetings and project coordination efforts and management efforts that we're going to put into this. You got to think of it very comprehensively. Having a line item on an order form that says we're going to do a pen test for 50,000 or whatever it is, I don't even know what you're really buying if you get something like that, right?
Never
It's
know
like
what you're going to get.
never know, never know what you're going to
Pen
get.
test is
Exactly.
like a box of chocolates.
There you go. So please take all these into account. You have to be an active part of going out and looking for somebody to assist you with this. Mike, you want to spin on the risk stuff?
I do. So if there was a question, if somebody wanted to go over that risk equation again, here's the simple way to think about this, okay? Risk is P times I. The probability that something bad happens, records disclosure, theft, extortion, disruption, being used as a third party to jump to others, okay? The probability that one of those things multiplied by the impact of that. All right. And here's the secret. Here's the way to boil this down and make it as understandable as possible. That P, that probability, the way that you buy down risk, addressing the probability term, is you apply preventive controls, firewalls, email filtering, train your users, manage your vulnerabilities, blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that's embodied in the regulatory requirements and the standards of practice. Do all that stuff. That's how you lower the likelihood. Now, there is so much money being made by cybercrime. It's considered equivalent to the GDP of a country. All right. And these people are not paying for pensions and education and, fixing roads. They use all that money to get better at what they do. So you are not going to go glove to glove with these people. I don't care what kind of prevention you put in place and all the magic AI you want to buy. You're going to get whacked. Okay. You are secure until your ticket is punched. Okay. So once you've done everything you can to buy down risk by addressing the likelihood term, okay, through the application of preventive controls, then you go to the impact term. And if you want to buy down risk by addressing the impact term, that's monitoring, detection, investigation, and rapid effective response. Okay. It's okay to remove a piece of malware from a workstation. It's not okay if you didn't see that thing happen and you got a ransomware event 3 days later, right? And all your backups are useless. I mean, there's all kinds of things that they do when they get into your environment now, and they're going to find your backups. They're going to do whatever they can to disable that. They're going to find your critical servers, right? And it ends up in ransomware. Okay. Right. So what you want to do is you want to put out the grease fire on the stove before the house is engulfed in flames. And the way that you do that is you monitor your network, hopefully 24/7, 365, because stuff happens at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. You investigate aberrational events on the network and you get after the ones that are real. Okay. That's how you buy down risk by addressing those two terms. Preventive controls lowers the likelihood of an event. Impact controls, monitoring, detection, and response, turn it into a tree falling in the forest. Okay. And there was a question somewhere I saw about resilience. What does resilience mean? It means you take a punch and you get back up off the mat before the 10 count. And the way that you do that is with good backups, making sure that you have good incident response plan, making sure you monitor your network and you have some way to investigate these aberrational events. And you're going to have to do it in a hurry because it's become a race. Bad guys are getting better and better and better at what they do. Do not think that you are going to implement controls and you are going to evade getting whacked, because everybody's going to get whacked. Already, it's like 79% of organizations or something like that have had these events. All right. So really lean into the monitoring, the investigation, the response, and use that as impact minimization. Lower the likelihood as much as we can. We admit something's going to happen. When it does happen, we're going to make it the minimum possible impact. That's the way to think about risk. Okay. All right. We talked about governance quite a bit, actually. And risk governance is mandatory. Okay. I talked about the SEC and what they want, Health and Human Services, other sector risk management agencies. They're all calling out this governance requirement. That means, at a minimum, a risk governance committee that adjudicates the disposition of identified risks, okay, with executive fingerprints. This white paper was written at the request of, let's just say, a large local government jurisdiction. And so we made it a little more generic. It's not so much about government, but it's about governance. And so here's a white paper that will talk about this in some detail. It talks about the 3 prevalent ways that networks are compromised. That's credential abuse, social engineering, and vulnerability exploit, and goes into a bit of a deep dive into all of those. I tell you kind of basically how to avoid those. But really, this paper is about governance. Governance will save you from civil litigation. If you're doing things right and you can show your papers when there has been an event, you can be insulated from the worst part of that, the long tail of a cyber attack. Okay, and with that, and I think Haley might have a link she can throw into chat there. I don't know if that happened, to get that governance paper. But if you have it, throw her in there. Okay. We got Daniel Cook. Is a good starting point to begin with the penetration testing and then continue to partner together to assess the information with FSA? No. The answer is emphatically 100% no.
No.
Right? Fred, you
Yeah.
want to talk about penetration testing and the kind of
Sure.
what people think that is versus what it is?
Sure. So very common for people to walk in, never really dealt with a consultancy before, and say, I need a pen test. And I say, okay, you're right. Everybody does need a pen test. How's your vulnerability management program? Have you been mitigating vulnerabilities for the last couple of years? What is that? Okay, you don't need a pen test. What's your baseline security assessment look like? We haven't done one. You're not ready for a pen test. Pen test is what comes after you've done vulnerability management, you've done some assessment, you've done a bunch of remediation. It's the last step when you go, okay, let's validate. Did all this stuff we just did and all this money we spent, all this effort, did it actually solve the problem? So the penetration test, everybody needs one. It comes later, folks. It's not a start. It's the end, or one of the end checkpoints, or the annual checkpoint. We've done all this stuff this year. Let's do a pen test and see technically how well did we do. So yes, everybody needs a pen test, but pen tests come late. You got to have a robust vulnerability management program in place, or you're just throwing money away, because my team will come in there, get domain admin 17 different ways, and you really don't learn much, right? So that's the story about that.
We did have a
Okay.
couple of questions here that I wanted to throw to you, Fred and Mike. 2 people both asking about Cohesity Data Cloud and how it proactively contributes to cyber resiliency. The first person says, beyond just backup and recovery, how does Cohesity Data Cloud proactively contribute to cyber resiliency? Can you elaborate on specific features or functionalities that help in threat detection, anomaly analysis, or preventing data exfiltration in the first place? The second person asks, given the hybrid and multi-cloud environments many organizations operate in, how does Cohesity Data Cloud ensure consistent cyber resiliency across these diverse infrastructures? Are there specific considerations or features for protecting critical assets residing in different cloud platforms or on premises?
So these people are Cohesity salespeople, or I will eat this microphone.
That's
Okay.
that's kind of what I felt, especially
Yeah.
because they're worded identically, but
Yeah. And we're not here to promote any product. Okay.
yeah.
But backup, the abstraction of backup, backups need to be immutable. Right? I don't care if you back up to your cloud. I don't care if you back up to a Linux server. It doesn't matter. They need to be unchangeable because that's one thing when they're going to get in your network and it's going to be an extortion run on you. That's what they're going to do. They're going to make it very, very, very hard for you to recover. So backups need to be immutable. That's the one feature I will say. Fred,
And
you got anything to say about this?
Yeah, one thing I always want to tell people, they go, "Oh, well, we'll just pay for the ransom and use the decryption keys." People have no idea how long it takes to use decryption keys for ransomware. You will recover in about a third of the time from backup than you will trying to decrypt stuff. It takes weeks
Mhm.
sometimes to decrypt stuff, people, not days. So I, I,
And the
I
decryption
choke,
key often doesn't work.
and often it doesn't
19,
work. And I
Yeah.
yeah,
choke every
19% of the
time.
keys fail.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
and keys fail, right?
And I think it's very important too that if you have these immutable backups, don't store them on your production network because if the bad actors get in there and they're like, oh, they're these immutable back, we'll just blow them away then. We'll delete your backups and then you have nothing. So keep it immutable and off the network and yeah. And 19% of people that paid the ransom never got their data back. So, are you willing to play those odds? I'm not.
The other question here, can you elaborate on specific features or functionalities that help in threat detection, anomaly analysis, or preventing data exfiltration in the first place? That's what this entire presentation was about. I don't know if you caught that or not, but these are all the things you do to prevent those bad things from happening, right? You align with the standard of practice because a bunch of 100-pound brains got together and said, well, if we want to prevent all this stuff and we want to implement a standard that we can give to everybody, it's all these things you do. You put your preventive controls in place. You train your users, right? You do blah, 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 blah. And then you have immutable backups would be great. You have good monitoring, good, effective incident response, got a plan for that, got playbooks for that. All of that stuff results in preventing data exfiltration, hopefully. But again, you're going up against probably the third largest economy in the world, and you're going to lose. So, the whole bit about impact minimization is really what we need to lean into. That's why the federal government talks resilience all the time. They use the word resilience. They expect everybody to know what it means. It means you've got to be able to take a punch because it's coming.
I think there also maybe a part of that question was more technical, like what do we look for in terms of monitoring for things like data exfiltration and particular things, which is a subject unto itself, right? Our entire managed detection and response unit here does nothing but that, and we work with dozens of different leading technologies that all approach those things in a different way. So that is another presentation, and we'd love to give it sometime, but those questions are very technical and very arcane, frankly.
Yeah. Matthew, hey, Matt. How do you keep backups off the network? You use a cloud backup system. That's fine. I'm actually a fan of tapes. I am a fan of tapes. I used to back up tapes on a VAX in a geology department. I got real good at it. Daniel, have you heard of further updates from HHS on when the new regulatory updates to HIPAA may occur? All the comment period has been closed. They terminated it. So I don't think these changes are going to happen at all. Congress is going to have to take it up.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Everybody, thanks for coming. Sign up for the daily InfoSec Insider News Blast. Goes out every day. We do free security awareness training every month. It'll be the last Friday of a month. Fred and I do a podcast every week where we talk about 3 or 4 events going on in the news that everybody needs to know about. And there's a download for the role of governance in consistent application of cybersecurity policy. Thanks. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize for that, but we all gotta go. Let's see if there's another one we can answer real quickly. It's just Jens is pontificating. That's not a question. Okay. All right. Good to go, everybody. Thanks a lot. See
Thank
you
you.
all later.
Thanks.